Rain lashed against the city's glass towers like a cruel reminder that life wasn't always fair. Inside a modest, run-down apartment on the outskirts, Emily Clark pressed a trembling hand over her daughter's forehead. Little Lily was still feverish. "Mommy, are we still going?" the 6-year-old whispered weakly, clutching a faded teddy bear. Emily's heart clenched. Every instinct screamed to stay home and care for her daughter, but the stack of unpaid bills on the counter told another story, a louder, crueler one. "Yes, baby. We have to," Emily murmured, forcing a smile that didn't quite reach her tired eyes. "It's a very important day for Mommy." She wrapped Lily in her old wool coat, picked up the umbrella with a broken rib, and stepped out into the storm. The bus ride to the city center was chaos. Crowds pushed, brakes screeched, and Lily's small hand gripped Emily's tightly, as if afraid the world might swallow them whole. Every raindrop against the window mirrored her fear. She had been jobless, for 4 months surviving on instant noodles and the hope that something, anything, would change. Today was her chance. A marketing assistant interview at Everhart Industries, one of the largest companies in the country. By the time Emily reached the marble steps of the skyscraper, her coat was soaked through, her hair plastered to her face. The receptionist's gaze flickered from Emily's worn shoes to the child in her arms, her smile fading instantly. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said curtly. "Children aren't allowed in the interview area." Emily's throat tightened. "Please, I didn't have anyone to watch her. It'll only be a few minutes. She'll sit quietly, I promise." The receptionist sighed, exchanging a knowing look with another staff member before picking up the phone. "Just wait here," she said coldly. Minutes later, a tall woman in a navy suit appeared, the HR manager. She glanced at Lily, then at Emily, her expression dripping with disapproval. "You must be Ms. Clark," the manager said, flipping through her clipboard. "You were scheduled at 10, and it's now 10:15. "And you brought your child?" Emily swallowed hard. "Yes, ma'am. I'm so sorry. I didn't have a sitter, but I'm ready for the interview. I won't let this affect—" The manager cut her off with a raised hand. "I'm afraid that's not how we operate here. We need professionals, not distractions." A few employees walking by slowed, whispering. Emily could feel their eyes pierce her dignity, her hope crumbling. Lily looked up at her, confused, as if asking what they'd done wrong. Emily's voice wavered. "Please, I really need this job. I have the experience. The HR woman sighed sharply. "I'm sorry, Ms. Clark. You're not a good fit. Let's not waste each other's time." The words hit harder than thunder. Emily stood frozen, humiliation burning her cheeks as the receptionist avoided eye contact. She turned to leave, but Lily's small hand slipped from hers, and in that moment, the little girl stumbled, right into the path of a man stepping out of the elevator. The man caught her instinctively before she hit the ground. He knelt beside her, his tailored black suit now splattered with mud from her shoes. "Whoa, easy there, little one," he said softly, steadying her. Then he looked up, and his gaze locked on Emily. His eyes, a deep storm gray, flickered between the frightened mother and the stern HR manager. "What's going on here?" he asked in a voice that was calm but carried power. The entire lobby seemed to pause. The HR manager straightened instantly, her tone shifting. "Mr. Everhart, this applicant brought a child to the interview. We were just—" He held up a hand. "And you were just turning her away, right?" His gaze hardened. "Interesting." Emily blinked, stunned. "Mr. Everhart? As in the Everhart? The CEO himself?" The room fell silent except for the rain against the windows. The CEO's eyes softened slightly as he turned to Lily, brushing a lock of wet hair from her forehead. "You all right, sweetheart?" he asked. Lily nodded shyly, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm okay. Thank you." And for the first time that day, Emily saw something unexpected in his eyes. Not pity, but recognition. As if he'd once known what it felt like to fight for something with everything you had left. But what he said next made everyone freeze. "Cancel my next meeting," he told his assistant, without looking away from Emily. "I'll be conducting this interview myself." The HR manager's mouth fell open. Sir, but he turned to her with quiet authority. No buts. Let's give every candidate a fair chance, even the ones who walk through storms. Emily's breath caught. She could barely process what was happening, and as she followed him toward the private elevator, still clutching Lily's small hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that her life was about to change forever. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft chime, sealing Emily, Lily, and the CEO inside a small, mirrored capsule of silence. Emily could still hear her heart pounding in her ears. She wanted to speak, to thank him, to explain, but her throat felt dry, her courage drowned by the weight of disbelief. This man standing beside her was Alexander Everhart, the elusive billionaire whose name was whispered in boardrooms and business magazines like a legend. He pressed the button for the top floor, his reflection calm and unreadable in the glass. Lily, meanwhile, fidgeted with her teddy bear, sneaking glances at him. He smiled faintly. "That's a brave little bear you've got there," he said gently. Lily grinned, her voice shy. "He's my lucky bear. Mommy says he's magic." Alexander's lips curved in a small, wistful smile. "I think your mommy might be right." Emily exhaled, finally finding her voice. "Mr. Everhart, I thank you for stepping in back there. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just didn't have a choice." He looked at her briefly, his tone even. "You don't need to apologize for doing what's right. Life doesn't always give us choices. It gives us tests." The elevator chimed again, and the doors opened to a floor unlike anything Emily had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of the rain-soaked city, while polished marble gleamed under soft golden lights. A quiet hush filled the space, interrupted only by the soft hum of air conditioning and the rhythmic tap of rain outside. Alexander led her into a sleek glass office that seemed more like an art gallery than a workspace. "Sit down," he said kindly. "Both of you." Lily perched on a leather chair beside Emily, swinging her legs while Alexander leaned against his desk. He studied Emily for a long moment, not with arrogance, but with genuine curiosity. "Tell me, Miss Clark," he began, "why did you bring your daughter here instead of leaving her with someone?" Emily hesitated, clasping her hands together. "Because there's no one else," she admitted softly. "It's just us. My parents passed away years ago, and her father," her voice caught, trembling like a fragile branch in the storm. "He left before Lily was even born. Since then, it's been one long fight to stay above water. I take any job I can find, but they never last. No one wants to hire someone with baggage." Alexander's expression remained calm, but his eyes darkened slightly at that word. Baggage. He knew it too well. He had spent his own childhood in the shadows of an empty mansion, raised by nannies in silence after his mother's passing. He remembered what it felt like to be treated as an inconvenience. "I see," he said after a pause. "And what makes you think you'd be a good fit for Everhart Industries?" Emily straightened, determination flickering through her exhaustion. "Because I've learned to make things work with nothing. I can handle deadlines, people, and problems most would walk away from. I don't have a degree from a fancy school, but I've got grit, and I'll work harder than anyone else you'll ever meet." There was no tremor in her voice now, just quiet strength. Lily tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mommy's really good at making things pretty, too. She made a poster for my school fair, and everyone liked it." Alexander chuckled softly, glancing at Lily. "Is that so? Sounds like your mom's a creative one." Emily flushed, embarrassed. "She likes to brag about me more than I deserve." But Alexander wasn't laughing at her. In fact, something in his eyes softened, a spark of respect. "Creativity and resilience," he murmured. "Two things this company could use more of." He moved to his desk and opened a drawer, pulling out a folder. "We'll begin with the test project. You'll get 3 days. Show me how you'd rebrand one of our smaller departments. Marketing, visuals, presentation, tone. Treat it as if you already work here." "Can you handle that?" Emily blinked, barely processing his words. Are you offering me a chance?" "I'm offering you a test," he corrected, though his tone carried a subtle warmth. "Pass it, and we'll talk about a position." Tears pricked Emily's eyes. She wanted to thank him, to promise she wouldn't let him down, but before she could, his phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, his jaw tightening briefly. Something unreadable passed across his features. Then he looked up, his composure returning. "My assistant will give you everything you need. And Miss Clark," he paused, his gaze lingering on Lily. Don't ever apologize for putting your child first. Anyone who thinks less of you for it doesn't understand what strength really looks like. Emily felt something stir in her chest, a fragile, long-buried hope. She rose, holding Lily's hand. Thank you, Mr. Everhart. I won't waste this chance. He nodded, watching as she left the office, her reflection fading in the rain-streaked glass. For the first time in months, Emily smiled as the elevator descended. It wasn't much yet, but it was a start, and what she didn't know was that Alexander Everhart hadn't been able to look away since the moment he caught her daughter. Something about that encounter had awoken a memory he thought he'd buried long ago, of another woman in the rain, clutching a child, begging for a chance, a woman who looked hauntingly familiar. The next morning the storm had passed, leaving behind a soft golden light that spilled through Emily's cracked apartment window. She woke before sunrise, careful not to disturb Lily, who slept curled beside her on the worn couch. The project file Mr. Everhart's assistant had emailed her the night before lay open on the small table. Company branding materials, graphs, and dry marketing reports. Emily rubbed her tired eyes and whispered to herself, 3 days. I can do this. She set to work with nothing but her old laptop, a mug of instant coffee, and the faint hum of the city outside. Her fingers danced across the keyboard as ideas flowed, colors that spoke warmth, words that inspired trust, designs that reflected humanity instead of cold corporate polish. She poured her heart into every slide, every sentence, imagining the faces of struggling families like hers who might find hope in the company's campaigns if they simply felt seen. By the third day, the project was done. Emily printed her presentation, neatly packed it in a folder, and dressed in her cleanest blouse, one she'd ironed by laying it under heavy books overnight. Lily skipped beside her as they boarded the morning bus, her teddy bear tucked under one arm. Are we going to the shiny building again, Mommy? Lily asked. Emily smiled faintly. Yes, sweetheart. And this time we're going to make them see what we can do. When she entered Everhart Industries, the lobby buzzed with the rush of suits, heels, and murmured greetings. But this time heads turned differently. Whispers followed her, not pitying ones, but curious. Word had spread. The single mom who'd been rejected by HR had somehow caught the CEO's attention. Still, not everyone was pleased. Upstairs, behind closed glass doors, HR manager Dana spoke in a hushed but irritated tone to another executive. This is absurd. She's unqualified, just some desperate woman who happened to get lucky because the boss has a soft spot for sob stories. The executive shrugged. You know how he is since that charity project last year. Maybe he sees potential. Potential? Dana scoffed. She brought a child to an interview. If she gets this job, what kind of example does that set? The door opened suddenly. Alexander Everhart stepped inside, his voice calm but laced with quiet authority. It sets an example of second chances, he said coolly. Is there a problem, Dana? The woman stiffened, caught off guard. No, sir. Of course not. I was just reviewing applicant profiles. Alexander's gaze lingered on her for a moment, sharp, discerning. Then he said, Good. Keep reviewing. You might learn something. He turned and left without another word, but the temperature in the room dropped several degrees. Dana's jaw tightened. Moments later, in his private office, Emily stood waiting nervously as Alexander entered. Lily sat in a corner chair, drawing quietly on a notepad his assistant had given her. The sight made him smile faintly before he focused on Emily. So, he said, gesturing to the folder she held, let's see what you've got. Emily took a deep breath and began her presentation. Her voice was steady but warm, her ideas simple yet striking. She spoke of connection, of empathy, of how even the most powerful companies could still have a heart. She wasn't quoting data, she was telling a story, and somehow that story made every slide come alive. When she finished, there was a long silence. Alexander leaned back, fingers steepled beneath his chin. Then he said quietly, You did all this in 3 days? Emily nodded. I worked nights. After Lily fell asleep, a smile ghosted across his face. You've got something rare, Ms. Clark. Vision. Before she could respond, the door opened. Dana entered holding a clipboard, her expression polite but tight. Sir, if I may, I've reviewed her file. No degree, no corporate experience. I don't think she meets our requirements. Emily's pulse quickened. She wanted to speak up, to defend herself, but Alexander's calm voice cut through the tension. Maybe she doesn't meet your definition of qualified, he said slowly, standing. But I see something that can't be taught. Drive, empathy, creativity. Dana hesitated, her mask of professionalism cracking. Sir, this could be perceived as favoritism, especially after what happened in the lobby. Alexander's eyes darkened slightly. If giving a hard-working mother a fair chance is favoritism, he said, then maybe this company's values need rethinking. Dana flushed, muttering something under her breath before leaving the room. The air grew quiet again. Emily exhaled shakily, her throat tight. I'm sorry, she said softly. I didn't mean to cause tension. Alexander shook his head. Don't apologize. You did everything right. He walked to the window, staring out at the city, the reflection of the storm now replaced by sunlight. Then, almost as if to himself, he added, I grew up watching my mother fight for her place in rooms that didn't want her there. People like you remind me why she never stopped. Emily blinked, startled by the sudden vulnerability in his voice. But before she could say anything, he turned back, composed again. Welcome to Everhart Industries, Ms. Clark. You're hired. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then tears filled her eyes. Thank you, sir. You have no idea what this means to us. He smiled faintly. I think I do. As Emily left his office with Lily skipping beside her, a quiet warmth filled her heart. She didn't know how long this blessing would last. But for the first time in years, she felt like life was turning a page. Yet as the elevator doors closed, she didn't see the expression on Dana's face from across the hall, a look that wasn't just resentment. It was calculated, and whatever she was planning next wasn't going to be kind. For the first time in what felt like forever, Emily woke up without dread pressing against her chest. The morning light filtering through the thin curtains felt softer, kinder. Her uniform, a crisp white blouse and a navy pencil skirt, hung neatly on the back of a chair. Lily, still in her pajamas, sat at the table doodling a picture of 3 smiling stick figures. A small girl, her mom, and a man in a suit. Who's that? Emily asked, smiling as she buttered the last slice of bread they had. That's Mr. Alex. Lily grinned proudly. He saved me when I fell. He's like a superhero, right? Emily chuckled softly. Something like that. She hesitated for a moment, then added, But remember, sweetheart, Mommy's boss is very busy. We have to be polite and not bother him, okay? Lily nodded, though her eyes sparkled with that innocent curiosity only a child could carry. By 9 a.m., Emily was standing inside the glittering offices of Everhart Industries once more, this time as an official employee. Her ID badge gleamed under the fluorescent lights, and her heart swelled with gratitude each time she caught her reflection. But while she moved through the open-plan floor, taking careful notes and meeting her new team, not everyone shared her joy. From behind a frosted glass wall, Dana watched her every move. Her perfectly manicured nails tapped against her clipboard, her lips curling into something cold and sharp. Let's see how long the charity case lasts, she murmured to herself. Hours passed in a flurry of introductions, emails, and training slides. Emily tried her best to absorb everything. She made friends with a kind accountant named Rachel, who whispered during lunch, no one's ever seen Mr. Everhart take personal interest in a new hire before. People are talking. Emily's stomach tightened. Talking? About what? Oh, nothing bad, Rachel said quickly. They just think maybe you reminded him of someone. He's been different lately, softer. It's nice, actually. Emily smiled faintly, though unease prickled beneath her skin. The last thing she wanted was to be seen as some sort of special case. She wanted to earn her place here. Late that afternoon, while she was finalizing a report in the shared office space, a message popped up on her computer. From Dana Mitchell. Subject, urgent. Rebranding pitch meeting moved up to 6 p.m. CEO will attend. Bring your notes, Emily blinked. That was unusual. She had thought the meeting was scheduled for Friday. Still, she gathered her folders and designs, making sure everything was ready. As the sun dipped below the skyline, the office emptied. Only a few lights remained on, casting long shadows across the glass walls. Emily walked toward the main conference room, the sound of her heels echoing faintly. Inside, Dana stood by the whiteboard, pretending to check her watch. You're late, she said coldly. I thought the meeting was at 6, Emily replied, glancing around. The room was empty. It was, Dana said curtly. But the CEO had to leave early. He asked me to review your work instead. Emily hesitated, setting her folders on the table. "Oh, I can wait if he's coming back." "No need," Dana interrupted, her tone dripping with forced politeness. "Let's see what you've done." Emily began her presentation, walking her through the new concepts she'd prepared. Color schemes, slogans, emotional branding. But Dana barely looked up from her phone, occasionally smirking as if amused by a private joke. When Emily finished, Dana simply said, "That's all?" Emily frowned slightly. "Well, yes. I wanted to keep it clean and honest." "The focus is on connection," and Dana snorted quietly. "Connection. That's sweet." She closed the folder with a snap. "Let me give you some advice, Ms. Clark. This is a corporation, not a charity. We don't sell emotions, we sell results. And frankly, your work looks amateurish." The word stung like a slap. Emily's hands trembled slightly, but she bit her lip, refusing to cry. I can make improvements," she said softly. "If you just tell me what's missing." Dana leaned closer, her perfume thick in the air. "What's missing is competence," she said with a thin smile. "And let's be honest, you wouldn't be here if Mr. Everhart hadn't taken pity on you. That did it. The humiliation, the exhaustion, the constant judgment. It all built up in her chest until the words came out before she could stop them.
"You don't know me."
"You don't know what I've survived to stand here." Dana's eyes gleamed. "Oh, but I do." "I did a little digging," she smirked. "You were fired from your last job for missing shifts, weren't you? Something about your daughter being sick. Tragic, really. Maybe this company needs someone who can actually show up." Emily froze, her face draining of color. She had never told anyone that. "How did you—" "Public records are easy to access if you know where to look," Dana said smoothly. "So let's make a deal. You resign quietly, and I won't mention to HR that you falsified your employment dates on your application." Emily's breath hitched. "I didn't falsify anything." Dana shrugged, feigning innocence. "Then prove it." "Oh wait, those records seem to have disappeared." How unfortunate. Emily's hands clenched into fists. She wanted to scream, to fight, but she knew this woman held power she didn't. Just then, a low voice cut through the silence. "Is this how we conduct performance reviews now?" Dana spun around, her face draining of color. Standing at the doorway was Alexander Everhart. His expression unreadable, but his eyes burning with quiet fury. He had seen everything. Dana stammered, "Sir, this was just a misunderstanding." Alexander stepped into the room, his gaze fixed on her. "A misunderstanding?" he repeated softly. "Then I suggest you stop talking before it becomes a termination." Emily stood frozen, her heart racing, unsure whether to feel relieved or terrified. He turned to her then, his tone softening. "Miss Clark, I'd like you to wait outside for a moment, please." She nodded shakily and stepped out, the sound of her heartbeat loud in her ears. Through the glass wall she could see Alexander speaking to Dana, his voice calm, but his expression like stone. Then, as Dana's composure cracked and she gathered her things, Emily realized something. This wasn't just about her anymore. Something in Alexander's eyes, in the way he'd looked at her that day in the rain, hinted that her story had struck far deeper than she'd ever imagined. The elevator ride down that night felt heavier than usual. Emily clutched her folder against her chest, her reflection trembling in the mirrored walls. The confrontation in the conference room replayed in her mind over and over. The humiliation, Dana's words, the cold satisfaction in her smile before Alexander appeared like a sudden storm. When the doors opened, she saw him waiting in the lobby. Not as the untouchable CEO in his pristine suit, but as a man whose face carried the weight of 1,000 thoughts. "Come with me," he said quietly. Not an order, but a request. He led her to a quiet corner office overlooking the sleeping city. The lights of skyscrapers glowed below like fallen stars, and the rain that had returned outside painted soft ripples across the glass. Alexander closed the door behind them, his voice calm but firm. "You didn't deserve what happened today." Emily shook her head. "Mr. Everhart, you didn't have to defend me. I can handle myself." He turned, looking at her for a long moment. "No," he said softly. "You shouldn't have to handle that alone." Silence hung between them for a moment, filled only by the soft hum of the city below. Emily's shoulders finally slumped, exhaustion and gratitude warring inside her. "Why are you being so kind to me?" she asked quietly. "You don't even know me." Alexander didn't answer right away. He walked to a drawer in his desk, opened it, and took out a small, weathered photograph. He handed it to her. Emily frowned slightly, confused. It was a picture of a young woman holding a toddler, both soaked from the rain, standing under a half-broken umbrella. The woman's smile was tired but radiant, her eyes filled with a familiar fire. "She looks like—" Emily began and then stopped. Her breath caught. The resemblance was uncanny. Alexander nodded slowly. "She was my mother." Emily looked up, startled. He continued, his voice quieter now, almost fragile. "She wasn't always rich. My father left when I was a baby. She raised me on her own. She worked as a secretary, then as a cleaner. Sometimes she'd take me to her jobs because she couldn't afford childcare. People mocked her for it, said she was unprofessional. She kept fighting anyway." His eyes grew distant as he stared at the photograph. "One day she brought me to a job interview. The manager threw her out because of me. She cried all the way home. I remember asking her if it was my fault, and she said, 'No, Alex. Someday when you have power, promise me you'll use it to give people like us a chance.'" He looked up at Emily then, his voice steady. "You reminded me of her that day in the lobby. You even held your daughter the same way she held me." Emily's throat tightened as her eyes glistened. I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," he replied softly. "Just promise me one thing. Don't ever let people like Dana make you doubt your worth." Her lips trembled as she nodded. "I won't." For a moment, silence filled the space again. But it wasn't the awkward kind. It was peaceful, like two souls recognizing each other's pain. Then Lily's laughter drifted from the hallway. Emily turned to see her daughter standing by the door, holding her teddy bear and grinning shyly. "Mommy, look, it's raining again." Alexander's expression softened. "Looks like the city's washing away the bad day," he said with a faint smile. Lily ran inside and peered curiously at the photo on his desk. "Who's that pretty lady?" she asked innocently. Alexander's gaze lingered on the image. "That's someone who taught me what real strength looks like." "She looks like Mommy," Lily said matter-of-factly. Emily laughed softly, brushing her daughter's hair. "That's a big compliment, sweetheart." Alexander smiled faintly but said nothing. Inside, though, something stirred, an ache he hadn't felt in years. The memory of his mother's last day alive. The regret of never telling her how much her sacrifices meant. He looked at Emily and Lily again, and the resemblance between their bond and his own long-lost past hit him like a wave. For years he had buried himself in work, convincing himself that emotions made him weak. But now, looking at them, he realized the opposite was true. That night, after they left, Alexander remained alone in his office long after everyone had gone home. The city lights flickered outside as he took the old photograph in his hand once more. He whispered, "You were right, Mom. Power means nothing if you can't use it to protect what matters." Meanwhile, across the city, Emily tucked Lily into bed. Her little girl was already half asleep, mumbling, "Mr. Alex is nice." "He doesn't look lonely anymore," Emily smiled, though her chest felt heavy with a strange emotion she couldn't name. But neither of them knew that Dana wasn't finished. In her own apartment, Dana sat before her laptop, eyes cold and sharp. She opened a file marked Confidential, a copy of Emily's job application, paired with an altered version she had created. The forged one showed inconsistencies, ones she could use to accuse Emily of lying. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. "You can't save her twice, Mr. Everhart," she whispered to herself. "Let's see how far your charity really goes." And somewhere, as thunder rolled faintly in the distance, fate began to turn its gears once more. Monday morning arrived with deceptive calm. Sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of Everhart Industries, making the office shimmer like a promise. Emily walked in holding 2 coffees, one for herself and one for Rachel, feeling a rare sense of belonging. For once, she wasn't the outsider. People smiled, nodded, even asked her opinion on small projects. She set her bag down at her desk, humming softly, when her phone buzzed with an internal company message. "Urgent. All department heads and marketing staff report to the main boardroom at 10 a.m. Mandatory meeting." Her stomach fluttered. It wasn't unusual for large meetings to be called, but something about the word mandatory made her uneasy. Still, she shook it off and focused on her work, polishing up the campaign proposal she and Rachel had been perfecting. By 10 a.m., the room was packed. Executives, managers, interns, everyone sat whispering in confusion. Then Dana walked in, her posture razor straight, her heels clicking sharply across the marble floor. In her hands, she held a thick folder stamped "Confidential." Emily felt her pulse quicken. Alexander entered moments later, flanked by his assistant, his expression calm but unreadable. The room immediately fell silent. He nodded briefly to Dana. "You called this meeting?" "Yes, sir," she said smoothly, her voice dripping with professionalism. "There's been a concerning discovery regarding one of our recent hires." A low murmur rippled through the room. Emily's heart dropped. She could already feel the invisible spotlight shift toward her. Dana continued, her tone sharp but rehearsed. "During a standard HR audit, I noticed discrepancies in the employment history submitted by Ms. Emily Clark." Alexander's head turned sharply. "Discrepancies?" Dana opened the folder and projected documents onto the screen behind her, the forged ones she'd created. According to these, she worked at ClearPoint Marketing for 2 years. However, a background check revealed she was terminated within 6 months and did not disclose the correct dates. The room buzzed with whispers. Emily shot to her feet. "That's not true," she said, her voice trembling. "I never lied. Someone must have changed those forms." Dana smiled faintly, feigning sympathy. "I'm afraid the system logs show the edits came from your account, Ms. Clark, and as you know, falsifying employment records is grounds for termination." Emily's eyes widened in horror. "What? No, I didn't." Rachel stood up. "That's impossible. Emily was with me the day HR uploaded her file. She didn't even touch the system." Dana's polite mask slipped just slightly. "You can't prove that." Alexander's voice cut through the noise like steel. "Enough." The room fell silent. He turned toward Emily, his gray eyes piercing but steady. "Miss Clark," he said softly, "do you have anything you'd like to say?" Emily swallowed hard, her chest rising and falling. Every pair of eyes in the room was on her. "Yes," she said finally, her voice breaking but brave. "I came here because I needed a chance, not pity. I would never risk that by lying. I've spent my whole life trying to prove I deserve to be in rooms like this one. If you can look me in the eye and say you believe I did this, then I'll walk out right now." Her words hung heavy in the air. Alexander's jaw tightened. For a moment, no one spoke. Then, in that stillness, Lily's small voice broke through from the open doorway. "Mommy?" Everyone turned. Lily stood there clutching her teddy bear, eyes wide and confused. Rachel must have brought her from the daycare room after hearing the chaos. The sight of her daughter's trembling lip almost undid Emily. Dana sighed theatrically. "Oh, wonderful. The child in the workplace again. Very professional. That was the last straw." Alexander's expression changed. Gone was the calm executive mask, replaced by cold fury. "Dana," he said slowly, "you will stop talking right now." She blinked, startled by the sudden authority in his voice. He turned to his assistant. "Pull up the security logs for HR's access over the last 48 hours. Every device, every edit," the assistant typed rapidly, the tension in the room thick enough to choke on. Within seconds, a list of recent activity flashed on the screen. Alexander stepped closer. "Highlight every edit to Ms. Clark's file." The room fell silent as the results appeared. Under the editor ID column, one name stood out in bold letters. Dana M.A. Collective gasp went around the room. Dana's face went pale. There must be some mistake. Someone must have..." "Enough," Alexander snapped. "I've seen enough." He looked at her with icy precision. "You manipulated company records to destroy a woman's career. You're done here. Security will escort you out immediately." Dana's mouth opened to protest, but one look from him silenced her. She turned toward Emily, eyes burning with venom, before storming out as 2 guards followed. Silence lingered in the boardroom. Then, slowly, Alexander turned back to Emily. "You were telling the truth," he said softly. Emily could barely speak, tears pooling in her eyes. "I swear I was," he nodded. "I know." His voice gentled as he turned to the rest of the room. "Let this be a reminder to everyone here. Character will always matter more than credentials. Ms. Clark will continue her work here with my full confidence." The applause started hesitantly, then grew until the room filled with it. Rachel threw her arms around Emily, whispering, "I told you he'd believe you," but Emily could barely hear. Her vision blurred with tears as Lily ran to her, wrapping tiny arms around her waist. "You're not in trouble, Mommy?" Emily knelt and hugged her tightly. No, baby, not anymore. Across the room, Alexander watched the two of them, mother and daughter holding each other in the center of that vast glass room, and something inside him shifted again. He didn't just see a grateful employee anymore. He saw a reflection of the family he'd lost long ago, the warmth he'd buried under years of ambition, and he knew, without a doubt, that this woman and her little girl had changed something in him that no amount of power ever could. But as the meeting ended, and the crowd dispersed, Alexander found himself staring once more at the rain beyond the glass. Because deep down, he knew that while Emily had found her redemption, he was about to face his own. That evening, as twilight brushed golden streaks across the city skyline, Emily stood alone at her desk long after everyone else had gone. The office was quiet now, just the soft hum of the lights and the occasional whisper of wind against the windows. Lily was asleep on the small couch near the corner, curled under Alexander's suit jacket, which he had wordlessly draped over her before leaving earlier. Emily watched her daughter's peaceful face and felt tears prick her eyes. It had been the longest, most exhausting day of her life, but somehow she'd come through it stronger. She thought back to the very first day she had walked into this building, clutching Lily's hand, terrified and desperate for a chance. How different things were now. Still, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was unresolved. Alexander had defended her, yes, but beneath his composed exterior, she had seen something else in his eyes today. Pain, guilt, a weight heavier than any corporate burden. The elevator chimed softly. She turned and saw him step out, his tie loosened, his expression unreadable but softer than usual. He walked over quietly, hands in his pockets. I thought you'd gone home, he said. Emily smiled faintly. I was just taking a moment. It's been a long day. He nodded and glanced at Lily. She's asleep again, I see. She can sleep anywhere, Emily whispered fondly. I think she just feels safe now. Something flickered in Alexander's eyes, something like longing. He took a slow breath. Emily, I owe you an apology. I should have seen what Dana was doing earlier. You didn't deserve that. She shook her head. You believed me when it mattered. That's all I'll ever remember. He looked down, then away, his voice quieter. You remind me of someone, he said. My wife. Emily's breath caught, but she said nothing. He went on, his tone distant but heavy with emotion. She passed away 6 years ago. Car accident. She was the bravest, most compassionate person I ever knew. The kind of woman who'd stop in the middle of the street to help a stranger. When she died, I threw myself into work. I thought if I became successful enough, powerful enough, it would fill the silence she left behind. But it didn't. It only made it louder. Emily's eyes softened. I'm so sorry. He met her gaze. Then you walked into that interview, holding your daughter's hand. Everyone else saw a disruption. I saw her eyes, the same light my wife used to have, the same courage. He paused, voice breaking slightly. You reminded me what kindness looks like. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The city below glowed like molten gold, cars weaving through the streets like veins of light. Emily finally said, You know, sometimes life takes everything away just to give us a chance to see what really matters again. He smiled sadly. You sound like her. Just then, Lily stirred, blinking awake. She yawned and rubbed her eyes. Mommy, is it time to go home? Emily knelt and brushed a strand of hair from her daughter's face. Almost, baby. Lily looked up at Alexander and smiled sleepily. Thank you for helping my mommy. The CEO, this man who had once seemed carved from ice, actually knelt down to her level, his voice tender. Your mommy didn't need my help, sweetheart. She just needed to be seen, Lily giggled. You're nice. Emily laughed softly, her heart full. Come on, sweetheart. Let's go home. As they headed toward the elevator, Alexander followed silently, as if caught between two worlds, one of glass and power, and one of warmth and love. At the doors, Emily turned to him. I'll never forget what you did for me today. He shook his head. No, Emily, you saved me too, just in a different way. She tilted her head, puzzled. He smiled faintly. When my wife died, I stopped believing in second chances. But today I saw one. The elevator doors opened, bathing them in soft golden light. Lily waved. Bye, Mr. Alex. He chuckled quietly. Good night, Lily. As the doors closed, he stood there for a long moment, staring at his reflection in the glass. For the first time in years, the man looking back wasn't just a CEO, he was human again. Weeks passed, and under Emily's guidance, the company's new campaign became a massive success. The story behind it, a mother's perseverance, the power of compassion, resonated with millions. Investors called it genius. But those who knew the truth understood it was more than strategy. It was heart. Emily became not just an employee, but an inspiration. The whispers that once followed her turned into admiration. And every morning when she walked through those doors holding Lily's hand, people smiled, not out of pity, but respect. One afternoon, as she left the office, she found Alexander waiting outside by the lobby fountain. The sunlight danced off the water, scattering tiny rainbows between them. "Heading home?" he asked. "Yes," she said. "We're making pancakes tonight." He smiled. "That sounds nice." After a pause, he added, "Emily, I was wondering if maybe, when you're free, we could all have dinner sometime. You, Lily, and me. No business, just life." She blinked, caught off guard. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "Completely." Lily, holding her mother's hand, beamed. "Can we make pancakes then too?" Alexander laughed softly. "Pancakes it is." As they walked off together, the sky above painted itself in hues of rose and gold. The air smelled of rain and new beginnings. And for the first time in a very long time, Alexander Everhart, the man who had built empires but lost himself along the way, felt something pure and real stirring in his chest again. Hope. Because sometimes, the bravest acts don't happen in boardrooms or battlefields. They happen in quiet rooms, between a mother and her child, in the courage to keep going when the world turns away, and in a single unexpected moment, when kindness walks back into your life and refuses to leave. The end. Moral. Never judge someone for the burdens they carry. Sometimes the person you reject for being inconvenient is the very soul who will remind you what humanity means. A single act of kindness can rewrite an entire story, both theirs and yours.